I feel a hand reaching around to my eye as if he's going to gouge my eye out. And at that point, I completely lost it, because what he immediately says after is, "Yeah, we train a little harder in Aikido. It's not like that." If you train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for any length of time, chances are you're going to have some visitors stop into your gym. Some of these visitors will be completely green, as in they have no grappling experience before. Maybe they did a striking martial art, or maybe today's their first day of any martial art. Some of them will be former wrestlers or judoka, people who have grappling experience. And some of them, the select few, will be Aikido practitioners. And there's a very particular experience that Aikido practitioners tend to have in Jujitsu academies, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about what that experience is and why they tend to get their egos bruised when they walk into a Jujitsu academy. I'll start this video off by sharing my very first experience with an Aikido practitioner, and we'll extrapolate some of the lessons from there. So to set the stage, I had been training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Judo, I'd say about 2 years at this point. The setting for this story is my college's Judo Club. This was just a bunch of students who got together. Some of them trained Judo before, some of them trained Jiu-Jitsu before, some of them trained a little bit both. Occasionally we would get some black belts in and they would show us some stuff, but most of the time we would just kind of beat each other up and practice our throws and groundwork and stuff. It was a lot of fun, made a lot of good memories, and being one of the more experienced people, I was helping run some of the practices. And this was one of the first days of a new semester, so we had a bunch of people coming in, making sure everybody's like signed up, they've got all their forms squared away. We have a bunch of gis, so we were giving people gis, sizing them up. This one gentleman comes in, he was a student, and he was wearing a black belt, and I go up to him, I was like, "Hey man, what's going on?" He goes, "Yeah, so he's telling me about his background and how he did Aikido for whatever amount of time and how he's got his black belt." I say, "Awesome, man. That's really great, actually. Because you have this experience, you'll have a bit of a leg up on everybody else. But you probably shouldn't wear your black belt on the mat just because you're doing a different martial art, and this isn't Aikido. Also, we do have an actual Judo black belt on the mat, so it'll be a little confusing if this is your first day." So another thing that we actually did to appease his ego is we had a white belt with some stripes on it. So instead of just giving him like the normal white belt like everybody else, I figured, there'd at least be some it was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu white belt, but had some notches on it. We're just a little club or everything. But I figured at the very least, he would have a belt that isn't the same as everybody else's, and that might make him feel a little bit better. I don't think it did entirely. The first part of the practice that we ran started with standard warm-ups. We did some break falls, we did some pulling drills, and then we did some rolls. We moved into a portion of the practice where we were doing some standing foot sweeps. So someone would be almost in a squatted position against the wall, and this would be practicing getting your pulls and then kicking their leg out from underneath them. It's a pretty nice drill, but essentially you're just going back and forth and learning how to get your turn, your kazushi, your off balance with upper body, while also sweeping the foot out from underneath at the same time. And I partner up with this Aikido guy because just how it worked out with the partners. I'm doing my drills, I'm getting a couple on him. Now it's his turn to do his throws on me, and I noticed that he's very jerky and tense. He doesn't seem like someone who's done this before, and he's trying to do his throws and he's sort of getting them. Then he goes in for his next throw, and as he's coming in, he crashes in with his head and headbutts me right in my lip and splits it open. But what got me is right after he split my lip open, he's looking at me, expected to be shocked and in awe. Because what he immediately says after is, "Yeah, we train a little harder in Aikido. It's not like that." And I'm like, "Okay, man." I don't say anything, and I'm not shocked at all. My lip is split open, but there's a big hurt and a little hurt. And a lip getting split open or a scratch, that's a surface wound. That doesn't actually affect anything. Now, if a ligament is torn or there's a serious injury, that's I consider to be a big hurt. But this is a little hurt. It's kind of annoying. It's the same level as a bloody nose. Bruh, come on. Don't headbutt me. That's you just don't have control when you're doing that. I go to the sidelines and I put some petroleum jelly on my lip to stop the bleeding, and I go back to practice. And then we cut to some groundwork, and I'm still working with him at this point. I figured it's a mistake. Everybody on their first day, especially if they've been grappling before, they might go a little bit harder than they expect. He doesn't know this. So we're doing the hip bump sweep, which is a pretty basic sweep that most people learn on their first days, and I'm practicing with him. And so I believe I am on the bottom and I'm practicing my sweep or whatever. And the setup we were doing this off of was if you break their posture down and hold them up, when they go to come back up, that's when you step through for your hip bump sweep. And he didn't want to play that game for the practice. And, you know, sometimes when people just show up to their first day of practice, they think they have to just instantly spar whenever they go into the practice session. And he might have had that mindset a little bit, because when, you know, I broke his posture down, and instead of him trying to step back up so we could go into the drill that we were practicing, I feel a hand reaching around to my eye as if he's going to gouge my eye out. And at that point, I completely lost it because, well, I didn't lose it, but I completely lost my patience with him, because at that, like, I was drilling with him. I'm like, okay, dude, we were drilling. And so, of course, like, how to stop the eye gouge? Well, control their hands, and then they can't gouge your eyes because you have their hands, and then go into the sweep. And so I straight up tell him, I said, dude, we're drilling. This is like a situation we're practicing that is not a live sparring session. If you want to go spar, give me like 20 minutes and we'll go to the sparring portion of the class. So at that point, I'm done drilling with him. I'm not going to drill with somebody who's going to poke my eye out, but we get to spar. And I actually want him to join the club, because I know for a fact that these are things that happen when you're new and when you're just getting into it. And if he was willing to stick with it for like 3 months, he would have had a big leg up, because he sort of knew some of things. But 3 months in, he would have had actual real practice against resisting opponents, and he would have understood, like, hey, you don't gouge people's eyes out when we're drilling. Even when you're sparring, you don't gouge people's eyes out, because that's a dick move. And we go to the section of the mat where we're going to spar, and essentially he's trying to do his Aikido moves that he's practiced against people who choreograph moves. So if you've ever seen Aikido practitioners practice, they sort of like, someone comes in and it's like, okay, so now I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, which is really surprising why he wouldn't do that in the jiu-jitsu context, why he wouldn't at least like sort of go with the moves instead of, maybe he had his ego bruised and was trying to like prove that he was tough enough or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, if you practice against non-resisting opponents and never go to live sparring, then your techniques are basically theoretical and they don't really work. So he's trying to do all these things like pressure point my hand. And if you've ever tried to like pressure point somebody's hands who actually has like used their hands at all, it'll feel like pushing into a brick, and it's not going to do anything. And he's sitting there putting on, just heaving on this pressure point, and I'm like kind of looking at him. So what I took away from this is, with very minimal grappling experience in a jiu-jitsu context, this was like 2 years-ish about of grappling experience, and I just completely mopped the floor with him. Like, it was just submission after submission after submission. I was like, hey, I'm going to get you in this, and then I got him in that. And the whole time, I was actually being very nice about it. I wasn't trying to get revenge for him, like, busting my lip. I wasn't trying to bully him or make him, like, completely uncomfortable and just squeeze the crap out of him in case so his lungs can't breathe. You know, I was going to score as many slam dunks in the basketball field as I possibly could. I was going to beat him in a 21-0 game in pickup basketball. And he wasn't physically hurt at all. And the whole time I was telling him, I was like, hey, man, I actually know how you're feeling right now. I know that, like, this is a frustrating experience, especially since you trained before. But if you stick with it for like 2 more months, I promise your background experience will come in and you will be able to get a lot better. Long story short, his ego seemed to be a little bit too bruised, and I never saw him again. I actually have another Aikido practitioner story involving a 15-year-old kid, and if this video gets like 20 likes, I'll make a video about that. Alright, so this video is actually getting pretty long, so I'm going to cut it off here at the end of the story, but I'm going to make a part 2, probably going to release it tomorrow, so if you're not subscribed or notified, now would be a good time to do that. And part 2 will be a breakdown of some Aikido techniques that I just found online, and basically explaining the core reasons why Aikido practitioners seem to get their egos bruised when they go to Jujitsu academies. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully I'll get it up tomorrow. Thanks for sticking it to the end. Sorry for making a part 2. Appreciate you anyways though. Peace.